Ah, look at you all. I want to thank Lillian Pincus, Howard Core, and my buddy Howard Friedman. Thank you for having me here again this year. It is so great to be back at Aipac, but I was just kind of thinking, what happened to that turntable thing from last year? I liked it. Sometimes it feels like politicians are just talking in circles. Last year we actually did. So maybe you can bring it back next year. First of all, how many people do we have here from Wisconsin? Awesome. Good to see you guys. I've been coming to this conference nearly every year since I arrived in Congress. Each time I ask myself, how could they possibly get more people than the last year? And here you are, you have done it again. This is really, really incredible. As I look around here, you know what inspires me the most? To see so many young people here, so many people from all walks of life, but especially, I am especially encouraged to see so many young people. I'm especially encouraged to see so many young people that I want everybody else to give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for taking the time. You are the next generation of leaders, and I can't thank you enough for getting involved. Let's give yourselves a big round of applause. This has been quite a year. When I spoke on this stage last March, it was just a few months into this job. It was spring break. I brought my kids with me. I hadn't even decked out my office of Packers gear before my team asked me, where do you want to go on your first overseas trip as Speaker of the House? The answer was obvious. I would return to the Jewish Democratic State of Israel. My first trip as Speaker. It was an incredible visit. From the unparalleled security cooperation to the miracle of Iron Dome, I saw firsthand the difference our support to Israel makes. Any American who has ever traveled there has heard the same thing, from political leaders to everyday citizens you meet on the street, and it is this: thank you, America, thank you. You see, Israel does not take our support for granted, and neither should we. The U.S. Israel relationship is not a one-way street. It is a strategic partnership rooted in shared values and interests. I want to speak candidly for a second. These past 8 years, they've been tough. Our friendship has been tested. No single political spat or public disagreement can sever our historic alliance with Israel, but it can erode trust. And I think the actions of this past administration damage this trust. That's just how I see it. But now it is time to turn the page. We have a new president. We have a president who I've got to know quite well. And let me assure you right here and right now, President Donald Trump's commitment to Israel is sacrosanct. Congress's commitment to Israel is sacrosanct. We don't take Israel for granted. We know that this special relationship is central to our national security. And believe me, that words must always be backed up with real, concrete actions. That's what I want to say to you here today. Let's start with Iran. Look, my views, your views on the nuclear agreement struck by President Obama are pretty darn well known. But we must not forget the failures of the past if we want to do better. Simply put, This deal has been an unmitigated disaster. I don't say that lightly. We provided billions of dollars in sanctions relief, sent more than $1 billion in cold, hard cash, and opened up Tehran to the global markets. And meanwhile, Iran has stepped up its support for terrorism, increased its human rights abuses, and ramped up its ballistic missile program, all while keeping its sights on a nuclear weapon. Republicans in Congress repudiated this deal, and for good reason. It is dangerous for the United States and for the world. So where does this leave us? Well, for starters, I think it is long past time that we rigorously enforce this deal and hold the Iranians accountable when they violate it. That's just not enough, though. A fatal flaw in this agreement is that even if Iran cooperates, it provides them with a patient pathway to a nuclear weapons capability. In about 7 years, key restrictions on centrifuge advancements and ballistic missile development begin to sunset. In 9 to 14 years, restrictions on uranium enrichment and plutonium reprocessing mostly disappear. This is totally unacceptable. So we must tighten the screws on Iranian compliance and continue to hit the regime with punishing non-nuclear sanctions for its range of illicit activities. Very clear. The Trump administration already did this in February by swiftly imposing fresh sanctions in response to more illegal missile tests. And just last week, with the help of Aipac, we introduced new bipartisan sanctions targeting Iran's missile program. At the same time, we can't embrace this deal as a fait accompli. We must reserve the right to explore options aimed at addressing its most fatal flaws: the sunset provisions, insufficient inspections, and acceptance of Iran's centrifuge development. So when it comes to preventing a nuclear Iran, all options can and must remain on the table. The problem here extends well beyond a bad nuclear deal and ballistic missile tests. This is a revolutionary and expansionist regime bent on destruction of Israel and the West. They continue to prop up a genocidal dictator in Damascus. They arm an insurgency in Yemen, and they bankroll terrorist organizations from Baghdad to Beirut. Their goal is regional hegemony, and it is compounding instability and bloodshed across the globe. To combat these threats, we must harness every instrument of American power. We must work with our allies and with Israel in particular to counter this aggression at every turn. We should expand sanctions on Iran's army of terror, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. I think we need to consider designating them as a foreign terrorist organization. If you ask me. And we should take steps to stop Iranian airlines like Iran Air and Mahan Air from delivering arms and fighters to terrorists across the Middle East. Next, we must fulfill our security commitment to Israel. You know, it wasn't too long ago that suicide bombings felt like a near daily occurrence in the streets of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And rockets from Gaza and southern Lebanon rained down on city centers and schools. Despite all the turmoil and the violence in the Middle East, Israel has largely been able to calm its borders and prevent major terrorist attacks. Hats off to Israel. I tell you, there's a lot we can learn. But threats still remain. At this very moment, tens of thousands of rockets are pointed directly at Israel from Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran. And that is why the United States, with support from Congress, has worked with Israel to deploy Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3. And we must continue to develop not only new missile defense technologies, but also those cutting-edge tools to detect and destroy these terror tunnels that are snaking into Israel from Gaza and potentially Lebanon. We cannot be complacent, and we cannot let down our guard. And that is why I want to pledge to you right here and right now, so long as I am in this job as Speaker, we will meet our military assistance commitments to Israel and provide additional funding in times of crisis when she needs us. We will be there. We are there, and we will be there for Israel. We count on each other. You know, Israel faces a new threat. I just mentioned their success. Well, their success in fighting terrorism has led enemies to resort to an insidious campaign of political and economic warfare designed to undermine Israel. You know what I'm talking about. Many of the college students here have seen this on your campuses. But all of us have seen this on the international stage. And you know what it's called? It's called the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, or BDS movement. We know the goal is to delegitimize Israel and isolate her under the thin veil of social justice and human rights. We saw this in December at the United Nations, an organization obsessed with singling out and demonizing Israel. So I want to say to the UN, we will not tolerate your anti-Israel bias. We will not tolerate it one bit. The Trump administration will not tolerate your anti-Israel bias. And the lady you just heard from, our strong ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, she will certainly not tolerate your anti-Israel bias. You know this, and you just heard it. Let's just make no mistake about this. Let's just be really clear what this is and what this isn't. The BDS movement is nothing short of another incarnation of anti-Semitism. That's what this is. Let's not be fooled by those who tell us this is about peace. This has never been about peace. In fact, it only makes a lasting agreement between Israelis and Palestinians more unlikely. No, this is about one thing and one thing only: Israel's right to exist as a Jewish democratic state. That's what this is all about. Let me just say a few words about peace. I still believe peace is possible. I do. But it requires leadership. How can we ask Israel to make peace with the Palestinian Authority that forms a unity government with Hamas? How can we ask Israel to make peace with the government that incites anti-Semitism and violence and then goes and names public squares after terrorists? How can we ask Israel to offer painful concessions in the name of peace when the other side still refuses to acknowledge her right to exist? This, to me, is the crux of the issue. We've heard the case that this is all about settlements, that if Israel just stopped building, we would have peace tomorrow. Let's just look at the facts for a second. When Israel offered the Palestinians 95% of the West Bank and 100% of Gaza at Camp David in 2000, and even greater concessions in 2008, they were rebuffed. When Israel completely withdrew from Gaza in 2005, I was there witnessing it then, they didn't get peace. They got Hamas rockets, terror tunnels, and 3 wars. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu instituted an unprecedented 10-month settlement moratorium in 2010, the Palestinians only agreed to direct negotiations in the final month and then blamed Israel for the talks collapsing. And all of this is to say that Israel is not perfect. They are not, and neither are we. But you know what? Israel is a free and vibrant democracy. They share our interests. They train alongside of our military. They provide critical counterterrorism assistance. And they remain our strongest ally in the Middle East. Finally, I'd like to address something that hits pretty close to home for all of us. In recent months, we have seen an uptick in vandalism, acts of desecration, bomb threats against Jewish communities nationwide. I've seen it in my own backyard, in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, right outside the district I represent, a community right on the north side of Milwaukee. There have been 2 threats on the local JCC. I was there in February. I mean, just think about the parents getting those calls in the middle of the day. It makes you turn your stomach. These threats and attacks on Jewish Americans are vile and they are disgusting. They're rooted in a poisonous ideology of hate, and they must be wholeheartedly rejected. So what I want to say to you is this: you're not alone. We stand with you. I stand with you. My colleagues in Congress stand with you, and the American people stand with you. Together, we will root out this evil wherever it may surface. We are all in this thing together. Friends, we are living in very dangerous times. ISIS still threatens our troops abroad and inspires terrorism here at home. North Korea continues to spew belligerent anti-American rhetoric while testing long-range missiles and nuclear devices. Iran fans the flames of sectarian welfare in the Middle East while marching toward a nuclear weapons capability. And Russia remains an ever-present threat to the post-Cold War order. In the coming years, dictators will rise and dictators will fall. Geopolitical landscapes will shift. Threats to our nation will evolve. But as I look out over this vast horizon of uncertainty, I remain optimistic. And so should you. That is because for all of the challenges we face here and around the globe, one vital thing remains constant: our unbreakable alliance with Israel. So I want to say a final thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for using your voice for good. And on behalf of Congress, thank you for sending a clear and unequivocal message to the world that the United States stands with Israel now, tomorrow, and always. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. God bless Israel. Good night. Thank you.